how do you come up with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Because you're fucking with a historical timeline.
Yeah. In 1962, the most famous cowboy in America had no name. Audiences knew him only as the Virginian. He wore the same black hat the villains wore, and yet he always did the right thing. Here is the strange part. The man who played him had never worked a cattle drive for a living in his life. He was the son of a New York University professor, born on a Manhattan street. And at the very peak of his fame, while millions of people watched him every single week, James Drury was fighting a private war that almost nobody knew about. A war that could have ended everything. So how does a city boy become the most authentic cowboy on television? What was the secret battle hiding behind that calm, steady face? And why did the man with no name end up outlasting nearly every star who had one? The records exist. The dates are documented. Let me show you. Number 1. The boy who was put on a horse before he could walk. James Child Drury Jr. was born in New York City on April 18, 1934. His father was a professor of marketing at New York University. His mother came from Oregon, where her family owned a working ranch outside Salem. And that single fact would shape everything that came after. When James was just 6 weeks old, his mother began taking him west for the summers. On that Oregon ranch, his grandfather, a man named John Crawford, did something that changed the boy's life. He put little James up on the back of an enormous Belgian plow horse. Drury remembered it his whole life. He said the animal was so broad that his legs stuck straight out on both sides, like he was doing the splits. That grandfather had crossed the country by wagon train as a teenager, riding west out of Missouri in the 1870s. He taught the boy to ride, to shoot, and to read the land. Years later, when James Drury built the most famous cowboy character on television, he admitted the truth. He had not invented that man. He had copied his own grandfather. But the road was not smooth. At the age of 10, James Drury was struck down by polio. In an era before the vaccine, that disease crippled and killed children across America, and it could have ended any dream of a physical, active life before it ever began. He survived it, he recovered, and he climbed right back onto the horse. So how does a boy who beat polio and learned to ride on an Oregon ranch end up in show business at all? Number 2. The stage king, who was thrown out the day before graduation. The acting bug bit early. At the age of 8, James Drury played a king in a children's Christmas play at a settlement house in Greenwich Village. By 12, he was already a professional, touring with a company, performing the play Life with Father. But school was another matter entirely. Drury attended high school in Los Angeles, and in a twist that sounds almost impossible, he was expelled from University High School the day before he was supposed to graduate. One day before, years of work, he was thrown out at the finish line. Here is where his father's job became his salvation. Because James Sr. taught at New York University, the school admitted the boy anyway. And inside that university, James Drury found the thing that would define his craft for the rest of his life. He found the drama department. He trained as a classical actor, studying the hardest material there is. This is the part most fans never learn. Before he ever sat on a horse for the cameras, James Drury performed roughly a dozen roles in the plays of William Shakespeare, along with the works of George Bernard Shaw. The man America would remember as a silent, plain-spoken cowboy had been trained to deliver the most demanding dialogue ever written in the English language. He even spent his final year of college studying horticulture and animal husbandry, the science of the land and livestock. So how does a Shakespearean stage actor end up under contract at the biggest movie studio in Hollywood? Number 3. The contract that lasted exactly 1 year. In 1954, while visiting his mother in California at the end of his junior year, James Drury walked onto the lot at MGM. Within 7 days, he had a studio contract. It looked like the fast track to stardom. It was not. MGM put him in small parts, often uncredited, in films you would still recognize today. He had bit roles in Blackboard Jungle, in the Doris Day picture Love Me or Leave Me, and in the science fiction classic Forbidden Planet. He was working at the most glamorous studio on Earth, and then, after about a single year, MGM let him go. The Dream Factory looked at James Drury and decided it did not need him. This is the first great rejection of his career, and it is the kind that breaks most young actors. Instead, he got backup. 20th Century Fox picked him up next. And there, Drury landed a role that history barely remembers, but should. He appeared in a film called Love Me Tender. It was the movie debut of a young singer named Elvis Presley. He also supported Pat Boone in his first film. For the next several years, James Drury did the unglamorous work that builds a real career. He guest starred on nearly every Western on television: Gunsmoke, Rawhide, Wagon Train, The Rifleman, Have Gun, Will Travel. He played small parts, took the checks, and learned the trade one episode at a time. He was not a star. He was a working actor, and he was waiting for the door that had not opened yet. So what was the single role that finally turned a journeyman into a leading man? Number 4. The villain role that changed everything. The year was 1962. A young, fierce director named Sam Peckinpah was making his first major studio film, a Western called Ride the High Country. It starred two aging legends of the genre, Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea. James Drury was cast as one of the villains. He played Billy Hammond, a crude and dangerous member of a brawling backwoods family. It was not a heroic part. It was nasty, and it was memorable, and Drury threw himself into it. He later called working alongside Scott and McCrea on Peckinpah's picture a great honor and a privilege. That performance did something. People in the industry noticed. The young man who had been dropped by MGM, who had spent years delivering 2 lines at a time on other men's shows, suddenly looked like a leading man. And the timing could not have been better. Because over at Universal, the executives were about to take an enormous, expensive gamble. They were building something television had never seen before. Drury later said something revealing about this stretch of his career. Before the Virginian came together, he had filmed a pilot for a different series called The Yank, and it failed to sell. At the time, it felt like another defeat. But if The Yank had succeeded, he would have been locked into it. And he never would have been free for the role that made him immortal. Sometimes the rejection is the rescue. So what was the gamble Universal was about to take? And why did James Drury have to fight so hard to be part of it? Number 5. 3 audition and 30 pounds in 30 days. Universal had a bold idea. They were going to make a Western that ran a full 90 minutes every week. No television series had ever attempted a weekly dramatic Western at that length. It was based on Owen Wister's famous 1902 novel, The Virginian. And James Drury was the frontrunner to play the lead. You would think being the frontrunner would make it easy. It did not. Even as the favorite, Drury was forced to screen test for the part 3 separate times. 3 auditions for a role everyone supposedly expected him to get. The studio wanted to be absolutely certain. Then came the demand that shows how brutal this business could be. The producers looked at James Drury and told him he had to lose 30 pounds in 30 days. 1 month to reshape his entire body or lose the role of a lifetime. He did it. And even after all of that, the decision came down to the wire. Drury and his future co-star, a young actor named Doug McClure, did not learn they had the parts until just 2 days before filming began. After 3 auditions, after starving off 30 pounds, the man still did not know if the job was his until the cameras were practically rolling. That is how close the most famous cowboy on television came to never happening at all. So what happened when this enormous gamble finally hit the air? Number 6. The most expensive show on television. The Virginian premiered on NBC on September 19, 1962. And from the very first episode, it was clear this was something different. It was the first 90-minute Western in television history, shot in rich color when most homes still watched in black and white. It was also staggeringly expensive. Industry accounts put the average budget at roughly $330,000 per episode. To understand how enormous that was, the hit show Bonanza was costing around $120,000 an episode in that same year. The Virginian cost nearly 3 times as much. It was quite simply the most expensive show on television, and at the center of it was Drury's character. With that one unforgettable quirk, he had no name. Through 9 full seasons, he was only ever called the Virginian. His white horse had a name, Joe D., but the man did not. Drury called it a sound dramatic device, one that gave the character an aura of mystery. He wore a black hat, the color of the bad guys, and yet he was the moral center of the entire show. The production schedule, though, was punishing beyond belief. To deliver 30 90-minute episodes a year, Universal ran 4 or 5 film units at the same time. Drury said he would literally ride his horse from set to set, giving 2 lines on one stage, 3 lines on another, then rushing somewhere else to perform 10 pages of dialogue. He called himself the unofficial keeper of continuity, because only he could keep the whole sprawling machine straight in his head. It was, he said, like making an entire movie every single week. So who stood beside him through those 9 grueling years, and what was he hiding from all of them? Number 7. 9 years, 1 friendship, and a secret. The Virginian ran for 9 seasons and 249 episodes. It became the 3rd longest-running Western in the history of American television, behind only Gunsmoke and Bonanza. Only 2 actors appeared in every single season from beginning to end: James Drury and Doug McClure. The cast around them was extraordinary. The great Lee J. Cobb anchored the early years as Judge Garth, and Drury said Cobb was his favorite of them all to work with. The guest stars were a roll call of legends and future legends: Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, George C. Scott, Lee Marvin. And in small early roles, 2 unknowns named Robert Redford and Harrison Ford. The story goes that Redford used his guest star paycheck to buy his first piece of land in Utah, the ground that would one day become Sundance. But the deepest bond on that show was the friendship between Drury and Doug McClure. It lasted far beyond the cameras. Drury said that for 30 years, no matter where either of them was in the world, they spoke on the phone 2 or 3 times every week. He called McClure probably the best friend he ever had. And here is the secret promised at the start. Behind that calm, commanding presence, James Drury was a man at war with himself. He was a heavy drinker during those years. The upright cowboy America trusted, the symbol of the steady moral code, was privately struggling with alcohol. Nobody watching at home would ever have guessed. The battle was real, and it was not over yet. So what happened when the most expensive show on television finally came to an end? Number 8. The cancellation he never wanted. By the 9th season, the network decided to shake things up. They renamed the show The Men from Shiloh, gave it a new theme by the famous composer Ennio Morricone, and changed the whole feel of it. Drury was blunt about why it failed. He said the audience tuned in looking for the Virginian, and they could not find him on their own televisions. In 1971, after 9 years, the show was canceled. And here James Drury said something that almost no actor ever says about the end of a grueling job. There was no relief, only sadness. He said plainly that he would have gone on for another 10 years. He did not want it to stop. But it did stop. And then came the part of the story the audience knows all too well: typecasting. James Drury had played one man so completely for so long that Hollywood could no longer see him as anyone else. He put it this way years later. He said the Virginian was an indelible character, and he had a great deal of trouble getting past being seen as the man in the black hat. He tried to move on. In 1974, he starred in a new series called Firehouse, playing a fire captain. He even attended the real Los Angeles Fire Academy to prepare, and reportedly finished 4th in his class. But the show was canceled after just 13 episodes. The The man who once carried expensive program on television now watched the offers dry up. The phone, which had rung for 9 straight years, went quiet. So what does a cowboy do when Hollywood decides it is finished with him? Number 9. The cowboy who started over in Texas. Most actors in that situation cling to the edge of fame. They take any role, chase any spotlight. James Drury did something far braver. He walked away, and he rebuilt his entire life from the ground up. He moved to Texas in the mid-1970s and became a businessman. He co-owned a ranch raising Appaloosa horses, the same breed he had ridden on the show. He ran a company that recycled asphalt. And he went into the oil and natural gas business, the rough, unglamorous world of Texas energy, a universe away from a Hollywood soundstage. The leading man had become a working entrepreneur, and he was not ashamed of it. He once said he was by no means retired, he was just out of work, like a lot of folks. And in those Texas years, he finally won the private war. James Drury got sober. In a later interview, he spoke about it with the dry humor of a man who had truly come through the other side. He had been sober for around 20 years. And added, in his own words, that he had spilled more whiskey than you would ever see. The battle that had hidden behind that calm face for years was finally quietly won. Hollywood did call again, now and then. And one of those calls is worth remembering. In 1993, the legendary Chuck Norris brought James Drury onto Walker, Texas Ranger, casting him as Captain Tom Price in the show's first 3 episodes. 2 icons of the rugged American hero sharing the screen, one pass respect to the other. He also turned up in the film Maverick in 1994, sharing a cameo with his old friend Doug McClure. So after all of that, the rejection, the typecasting, the war with the bottle, how is James Drury remembered today? Number 10. The Last Ride of the Man with No Name. In 1991, James Drury received an honor that settled the question of his place in history. He was inducted into the Hall of Great Western Performers at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. The journeyman who had been dropped by MGM now stood enshrined among the immortals of the genre. And he spent his later decades doing something remarkable. He became an ambassador for the West. He toured festivals, autograph shows, and conventions across the country year after year, meeting the fans who had grown up with him. He did not hide from his past, he embraced it. He spoke about cowboy values and how those values still held true for anyone willing to live by them. Drury lived by a simple creed he called the cowboy way. He put it in 3 lines. If it is not true, don't say it. If it is not yours, don't take it. And if it is not right, don't do it. It was the code of the character he played, and by the end, it was indistinguishable from the man himself. Here is the final answer to the riddle we started with. Why did the man with no name outlast nearly every star who had one? Because the no name was never a gimmick. It made the Virginian into something larger than one person. He became every good man who ever did the right thing quietly, asked for no credit, and kept his word. That is why a New York professor's son, trained in Shakespeare, became the most believable cowboy in America. He was not playing a name. He was playing a code. James Drury took his last ride on April 6, 2020, at his home in Houston, Texas. He died of natural causes, 12 days short of his 86th birthday, just months after the death of his beloved wife of 40 years. When the news broke, his longtime assistant announced it with words that fit him perfectly. The cowboy took his last ride. He is buried in Abilene, Texas, in the state he had made his home, far from the Manhattan street where he was born and the Oregon ranch where a little boy first sat on a horse so wide his legs stuck straight out on both sides. The man had no name. He never needed one.